Hi everyone, my name is Taryn with Quest, and today's presentation is Sierra-Cedar's PeopleSoft Playbook, Winning Strategies for Today and Tomorrow's series, and today is part 2 of the series. So today's presenters are Lisa Riley, and she is a lead business analyst at Domino's with 20 years experience on PeopleSoft, ERP, and financials. And Richard George of Sierra-Cedar. He is the Vice President of Strategic Services at Sierra-Cedar. He has over 25 years of experience with system integration that spans many vendor solutions in both HR and financial systems. Richard is a subject matter expert in the areas of strategic HCM systems roadmaps, HCM technology needs assessment, systems evaluation, vendor selection, process re-engineering, implementation, organization change management, and comprehensive and end-user training. So a few housekeeping notes to go over before we get started. All attendee lines are in mute and will stay in mute throughout this session. If you do have any questions, please feel free to put those in the question drop-down box. We will answer those at the end of today's session. And this session is being recorded and it will be uploaded to the Quest content library, and you all will be receiving an email notification from me when that is available. So I'm going to hand it over to Richard, who will get things started.
Thank you very much. And welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen to this webinar. And this is a continuation of what Stacey Harris did in her first webinar, where she simply presented data out of our survey on what people are doing and what specifically around PeopleSoft. This webinar is focused on realizing the value from PeopleSoft. And a few goals. Number one is to resolve some misconceptions about PeopleSoft. I hear them every day, and it's surprising to me what some of them are. There's a little test on a screen or two down here. The second is really understand the value proposition that PeopleSoft can provide to you. I think some people might be surprised here on the value of it. And I'll talk briefly about the cloud, the advantages from cloud and hosting, but that's webinar 3, so I'm just going to briefly touch on that, as well as integration strategies. Those were the goals for today. So let's look at our two presenters, a picture of me. And Lisa, if you would go ahead and introduce yourself so people know your voice.
Hi, I'm Lisa Riley at Domino's Pizza.
And again, Richard George with Sierra-Cedar, and we will get moving. So one of the questions that Stacey had in her last webinar, which is webinar 1, and that is available for replay, is how does PeopleSoft really remain a worldwide leader in ERP? It's really simple. Oracle PeopleSoft puts a lot of investment into the system. It shows in the innovation that they are doing with the system, and I'll give you hard data on that in lots of different places. And what that ends up doing is that they're really engaging with their customers, and you as organizations can better engage with your employees. So let's move on. And I wanted to spend one last slide just talking about bridging what happened with Stacey's webinar and this one. And she said, asked the question and showed the data of why organizations are shifting to cloud or SaaS systems, software as a solution. And they were looking at improved user experience, that you can go mobile, that the analytics reporting were better, that it was easier to manage IT expenses, that you had a consistent update schedule that was pretty regular, and that you could grow and scale as demands change, and also with improved security. And give me 1 second. And so we talked about the cloud-focused world and all those reasons of going into cloud. How does PeopleSoft remain a worldwide leader with their enterprise application software? We talked about their investment that's huge, and we see that through the innovation, adaptive features. They have selective adoption, which is PUM, PeopleSoft Update Manager, which can lower your TCO. And we see how users have a much easier system to use with Fluid, and that's benefited organizations with lower training costs, easier easier time for users to understand the system and use it. And Lisa's going to show how the power of PeopleSoft allows them to meet their requirements when there's not out-of-the-box functionality presented by PeopleSoft and really any system. They have a really powerful and unique solution here that helps them. And with any system, I think one of the key things is keeping current. That means with PeopleSoft applying the images, simplifying, that's just the key to realizing value. So misconceptions. Where do I start? I've heard these and many more, and these aren't in any particular order, but number one is that few organizations use it still, that it isn't user-friendly, that it doesn't have a future. It hasn't innovated. It can't be updated. It's expensive, and it's only on-premise. So I'm going to spend the rest of, the bulk of the time here and talk about why, address all of these points. And Lisa, I wanted you to, if you could share with the audience a little bit about what the requirements were or what the problem was that you had with opportunity, perhaps a better word, with the franchisees.
Hi, everybody. I am happy to be here today to let you know how Domino's Pizza was able to use PeopleSoft to solve one of our business challenges. Basically, Domino's had collaboration challenges with our franchisees. There were too many communication channels, and there was not a single location for business-related transactions. Some of the business transactions with the franchisees include the franchisees reporting of their royalty sales, Domino's issuing billing invoices and AR statements, and the franchisees making payments on their invoices. To sum it up, Domino's was in need of an integrated, secure, and collaborative back-end business system for all things franchise. A little later in the presentation, I will let you know how we solve this issue. Back to you, Richard.
Thank you, Lisa. And truly a tough problem to solve. There's a lot of franchisees, a lot of Domino's systems, and it's a challenge just to communicate with them. So we want to start off with a poll and ask which of these statements is most true? Most true, that few organizations use it, it's not user-friendly, it hasn't innovated, it can't be updated, or lastly, answer selection number 5, that none of the above is true. And Karen, you go ahead and launch that poll.
Okay.
And so it's fair. I think a number of people have seen this before, but it's fairly easy. All you need to do is click and see which one of the above is most true. And I'm sure people have heard many of these as well as probably hundreds of other statements that simply aren't true about PeopleSoft. Do we have the results, Taryn? Well, we have selections in every category, but I think the last one, none of the above is true, is most true. And I have a lot more data on this than what I'm presenting here. We just have a short hour. So let me go through and let's look at it. So in PeopleSoft innovation. So first of all, not many people use it. 5,000 customers. 5,000, that's 5,000 organizations. And to further drive that point, Oracle reports that in an organization. So if an organization has multiple divisions or multiple groups, whatever in it, they shrink that all down and count that just as one organization. They don't count all the licenses. Further, if you look at all the SKUs they have, all the applications they have, that's a huge number. And if I move up, there's 100+ organizations using Oracle Cloud to host their system in. That means that they're not running it on premise anymore. And it doesn't, that 100 doesn't include all the other places that host PeopleSoft systems. 80% of the organizations are running on 9.2, which means they have access to PUM and Fluid, as well as many other things. There's 2,000 new features. There's supported through 2030, and I'm just astounded, 2030. No other system that I know of has in writing that they're going to support the system through 2030. And that's a rolling 2030, so that when they get to 2020, which is just a year away or so, is that they'll start doing a 10-year rolling support strategy. And they get 4 updates a year. So the whole concept about that the system isn't updated, there's 4 updates a year. That's more than some SaaS systems. And these are easy to update, and I'll talk about that. You said that PeopleSoft doesn't have a future. This is a written roadmap of what they're doing in the next 12 to 18 months. From HR work centers, which are, if you haven't used any work centers anywhere, these are really great. That brings everything together for you. Inventory substitutions in the supply chain area. So if you're out of stock, quick, what can be used in this place of this? Well, that enhancement will do that for you. Match exceptions, and I'm a person that has a background in accounts payable. Match exceptions is something that is near and dear to my heart. All of these things reduce time, they automate processes, and make the system better. Clearly, PeopleSoft has a future. I said there were 2,000 new features that PeopleSoft has. Certainly innovative. Look at the numbers. 553 for HCM, the 716 for financials, 251 for just supply chain, CRM, and campus solutions. So let's not forget them. And People Tools, almost 500 new features. And I will give some details on those. And this is as of January 2019. And there's many, as we saw on the roadmap, many, many things to come. So I want to talk first about the user interface. And I wanted to talk a little bit about an idea called Weber's Law. And Weber's Law was something that I first heard when I was a child. And the basic thing that Weber's Law says is that for a human to notice a difference in anything, whether it's length, whether it's color, whether it's weight, whatever, you need at least a 10% difference. If it's too close, we can't tell. So the example is if it's 10 pounds, you need something at least 11 pounds or 9 pounds to tell a difference. So why do I bring this up? Well, let me show some differences between PeopleSoft Classic and PeopleSoft Fluid. So looking at Weber's Law here, keeping that in mind, on the left we have a SaaS system, and on the right we have a PeopleSoft screen, Classic screen. And the point being is that the PeopleSoft screen, we can easily see there's lots of information on there, really usable, probably very powerful, but if you haven't been trained how to use that screen, it's going to take some time. And I think from casual observation, if we showed these to, non-users, they would say, well, I think the one on the left might be a little easier where I can just click something. We don't need the mathematics, and the mathematics came from our HR technology survey. And if you haven't seen that, I'll show a little bit about that. But users rated their system, their SaaS systems, as a 3.8 on a 5-point scale of ability to use it. And they rated PeopleSoft Classic as a 3.1, 23% difference, clearly more than 10%, but we don't need the math to tell us that those screens are hugely different. And if we look at that same SaaS screen on the left and compare it to PeopleSoft Fluid, we're basically looking at circles versus squares. And I think that most people would say there's not a lot of difference between those two screens, and the math proves that out, where there's a 3.8 for that SaaS system on the left, or SaaS in general, and PeopleSoft with Fluid has a 3.6. Both of those are top scores in our survey. So PeopleSoft is definitely the top user experience. I said there were 1,520, there's over 2,000, but if we look new innovation features, but if I look at just some core things from HCM, financials, and supply chain by release, and the releases at the bottom of that graph, and the count is on the top by release, we can look at just in the last few years, they're averaging maybe somewhere around a little over 50 new innovations every release, every 3 months. And if we look at campus solutions, CRM, et cetera, tools, they're producing a release, a new feature every single day. And if you've ever had to write functional requirements or the technical requirements or design it, develop it, test it, turn over, document it, doing one a day, that's impressive to me. And you can only do that through a lot of investment in the system. Well, let's drill down. HCM, we can see that they have over 20 new features every release in the last few years. And if we drill down a little bit more, we can see by, let's say, application area, where those are. And there's a little something for everybody. In some places, there's a lot of things. And I think that one of my favorite areas is if you use recruiting or applicant management, it is not your father's system or the system that we originally saw some years ago. It is easy to use, and we have clients that have made a few modifications to the system where they made it where they tweaked it for their applicant base, and they dramatically increased the number of people that were applying. And PeopleSoft is flexible to do that. It allows that. Let's look at financials. 716 new features, not quite as many every day or every image as HR, but we see that they average almost 20, or if we average some of those spikes from the image 18 and image 24, over 20. Well, let's look at some of the details of those, and we can see that there's, again, something for everybody. And one of my favorite areas here is in e-procurement. And I'll show some screenshots about that a little bit later. But we talked about matching in AP. Receivables has 73 new functional enhancements. Again, big numbers. And if you're not looking at these, you should. There's something, again, for everybody. Supply chain, probably averaging 10 or more every image. And if we again look at the details here, from billing to general improvements to mobile inventory, just to inventory. I mentioned about the substitution, or if you run out of stock on something. They're just enhancements and features that allow people to decustomize and improve their systems. People tools for the techs that are dialed in. You can see almost 500 new features, and you can see those by tools release. One of my favorite ones here that just came out with 857, and that's been GA for about 3 months, general availability. It's been out about 9 months, so it has settled down. And we're seeing tremendous interest now with our client base in updating to Tools 857. And Tools 857, one of the best features there is the ability to allow you to put customizations in drop zones, but there's a lot more in there to allow you to have your customization and not impact your ability to take on updates. And again, a listing of areas where PeopleSoft or PeopleSoft has provided new features and functions just in tools. And I think the tools area is particularly powerful because these just don't hit one area typically. They hit lots and lots of area, such as through search. So let's look at mobile. And before I go into that, I want to just say this is where I'm getting some of my data. This is the cover page from our HR technology survey. We also have a financial survey. I have links at the very back of the presentation that allow you to go find these easily. But this is data that organizations have presented in this survey. About, it's just under 1,400 organizations replied, and we're just reporting their data. In that survey, they picked mobile as the emerging technology as #1 popularity. And I don't think we're going to see this again next year. Why? Because 51% of the organizations reported that they've deployed mobile. If anything, I'm surprised it's that low. But I do know organizations that haven't deployed mobile, but it's on their roadmap. And we see that 8% are looking at it for next year, and 23% do have that scheduled a little bit further out. But I bring up mobile because, and let me drill down on that, and I'll show the value of it in a moment. If I go from left to right, if we look at all on-premise systems, about 40% of organizations have deployed mobile. Hybrid, which is I've got some on-premise, I've got some applications in the cloud. About almost half of those have deployed mobile, and fully 70% for full SaaS environments. But PeopleSoft Classic on the right, only 35% have deployed mobile there, and that essentially increases almost 50%, 50% to 50% for PeopleSoft Fluid. That's saying that if they've deployed Fluid, half of them have deployed mobile as well. And I know that's not simple. I've talked to a lot of organizations about that. There are policy changes that, are we going to let people bring your own device? If they do, can we do remote wipes on that? But those are all manageable issues, and the security concerns around that can be addressed as well. A couple of screenshots is for our HR listeners. If you haven't seen this, this is on the time recording off of a phone, whether it be iPhone or an Android. Pretty intuitive that I would click the time button in the upper right. It comes up to a timesheet in the top of the screen. I open the timesheet. I can record my time. I can record ins and outs and breaks, and then I can submit it, and I can see my weekly summary. Organizations that have time and attendance, they love this. The users love it because they can see exactly what they've recorded. They can see also how much time they have left in the year for vacation, etc. The payroll people and time reporting people see it, and supervisors, because they can see who's reported, who hasn't, and then make a nice request to report your time on a timely basis. For the financial supply chain people, requisitioning, there's an EREC. Again, pretty straightforward. A shopping cart requisition, I click that. It goes to a catalog that we've allowed people to say they're authorized to buy from this. They can pick it, they can add it to their shopping cart. And the one difference here is that they don't have to pay for it themselves. They instead of paying for it with their credit card, they can submit that and to the requisition and get it approved, and then they can track it all the way through, that it's been submitted, that it's been, where is it in the whole process? All on their iPhone, tablet, PC, Mac. Pretty cool. So let's look at some PeopleSoft specifics, and we measure in our survey things that dissatisfy organizations as well as what satisfy them. And if we see the number one item in PeopleSoft Classic that organizations are dissatisfied with is the user experience, i.e. they haven't deployed Fluid. I'm not surprised they're not happy with that. But if we go over to PeopleSoft Fluid, and people taking the survey, one little caveat here is they pick something. And so they picked high cost. And keep that in mind, the cost thing here, because I think that's not completely an accurate choice of theirs, but they had to pick something. But user experience, industry specific, lack of innovation, those all drop. Let's see what people are happy with, the satisfiers. Well, it doesn't matter whether you're Classic or Fluid, people like the ability to customize, because while we do a lot of things the same, there are things that are special to us. And Lisa talked about one specific example with the franchisees, but we all have them. They're part of life, that make us unique. But in the PeopleSoft Fluid, the ability to customize, the ability to have an integrated solution, best practice, good vendor relationship, are all things that make people happy with PeopleSoft Fluid. Let's look at this kind of information a different way. And we ask a question in the survey, does your HR system meet your business needs? And we give them 5 choices. It always meets it, which is a tough thing to click always, where it does it most of the time, half the time, sometimes, and never. And surprisingly, there are people or organizations that pick never, and they're actively looking at changing systems too. But on the left-hand side is PeopleSoft Classic. And we see about 60% there pick most of the time and always. The rest half the time and 7% say sometimes. But this surprised me when I was looking at the data that the survey had. And again, around 1,400 organizations overall. These are just the PeopleSoft Fluid users. They're saying it either always meets my need or most of the time. No PeopleSoft organization said it was never or sometimes or half the time. So if you're not, my takeaway here is if you're not using Fluid, you're not running best practice, and you're certainly not going to be as happy with your system. Mobile is a key part of that as well, allowing people to report time, to do requisitions, just to do approvals when they're not sitting behind the firewall. And there's lots of ways to work that, and I'll talk about that again in a moment. So we also hear that the PeopleSoft system is not easily updated and tested. Well, PeopleSoft comes out with 4 updates a year. They have PeopleSoft Update Manager for anybody that's on 9.2. And from the upgrades that many of us have been involved with from time to time, they were pretty intense. Often they were necessary just to stay supported by PeopleSoft in case there was a problem. That was expensive. There were often 2 commas in the whole price, and it was tactical. Oftentimes organizations were scrambling for time, so they just did the basic update and they didn't look at anything else. But with updates, and updates are just those quarterly image releases, they can be routine. They're very impactful. We saw the innovations that they have. They're very affordable because of the automation that Oracle PeopleSoft has put into the system now with PUM, and they're strategic. Strategic to me means is that if the image came out today and you're trying to close the books, you're trying to do something, you've got a merger going on, maybe it's end of year, maybe it's open enrollment, you can say with PeopleSoft, I'll hold off, or maybe I'll just take this one update or anything in between. But PUM is so strong is that it can take all the updates. You can take everything once a year and get current, and it's smart enough that if you didn't pick something with one image, it will go back and grab everything for you to make sure that the system works. I'll say if you're using PeopleSoft Update Manager PUM, you need to be using PTF. And I'm certainly not going to read the points on the right, but you can glance at them. PTF is PeopleSoft Test Framework. Everybody who updates their system has test scripts, and they test the system. What PTF does is allow you to build that script, automate that script, so that it runs automatically for you. And as a manager that might be responsible for making sure that they not only applied updates, but that the system works, is that I got a lot of comfort and I sleep well at night if I run my PTF scripts, because I know 100% someone actually ran those scripts, the system ran them. I can get good reporting out of them, tell me what succeeded, what failed. We actually created a PTF work center, and there's more information on that on our site, where it pulls everything together for PTF for people. And there's a huge library that we've created for PTF for our customers that they're eligible to use with, they need to go through some, sign up for that. But it automates and drastically reduces the time to apply a update and apply the testing and make sure your system works. So just in summary, and I'm not finished yet, Lisa's got to talk about what they did at Domino's, and I just want to close it down. But just in summary, so what I talked about, Fluid, it makes the differences between different user experience, it just disappears, increases productivity. PTF, the images, and the People Tools updates have allowed people to isolate customization, and the updates are really easy. Now I mentioned that we do PTF services for organizations. We also have a PUM as a service, where we can do, if you don't have the time, we can do tremendous amounts of work. It's really a la carte. on what we can do to help you update your system and help you get it tested so that you have assurance there. And then lastly, if you put PeopleSoft in a cloud environment, and I don't mean going to a SaaS system, I'm saying that someone's hosting it, or more simply, it's PeopleSoft off-premise. That can simplify because you don't have to worry about your hardware anymore. You don't have to worry about the database, the operating systems. Those can all be patched for you. Even your PeopleSoft system can be patched through the PUM as a service and PTS. It lowers capital costs and it simplifies. And if you're looking at mobile and and the organization has an issue about working behind the firewall, if it's off-site, that could eliminate that whole problem about being behind the firewall. So Lisa, we talked a little bit about how PeopleSoft was innovative. Can you share what the power and the flexibility of PeopleSoft did for Domino's?
Yes, certainly. To solve our collaboration challenges with our franchisees, in PeopleSoft, we custom built what we call a franchise business hub. This is an online collaboration portal for the franchisees to access. Next slide, please. This portal is a two-way communication. Domino's issues the invoices and AR statements for the franchisees to view online, and the franchisees report their royalty sales and make payments via this portal. The issuing of the invoices to the hub was a big win because we generate over 1 million billing invoices each year, and previously they had several delivery methods depending on the business segment. Invoices were emailed, they were mailed, or they were sent on the trucks with our food deliveries to the franchisee stores. It was very challenging for the franchisees to keep track of the invoices and their payment due dates. Now they can find their invoices on the hub at will, and we also built a feature where they can elect to receive an email listing of all their invoice numbers that were generated over the previous week. Feedback from the franchisees has been all positive. They find the fluid interface is very intuitive and easy to use for them. And overall, this innovation with PeopleSoft has been a great success story for us here at Domino's. Back to you, Richard.
Well, thank you, Lisa. And I've looked at the system, and one of the things that's most impressive to me and helpful is the bottom left is the contact us, whether it's phone or email. Domino's is a big organization with lots of franchisees, lots and lots of stores. And even in our little company of Sierra-Cedar compared to Domino's, it's a challenge to know who to contact sometimes. That one little app that they have there, I think, is just tremendous. And kudos to Domino's for being creative and innovative here. Well, let's look at the depth and the breadth of PeopleSoft. And before I go to the next screen, think in your mind about how many separate SKUs Oracle PeopleSoft sells for PeopleSoft as of January 2019. And a SKU being like a different application, accounts payable, HR, payroll, inventory. Do you have a number? Well, let's look. 174 separate SKUs, 174 across HR, finance, manufacturing, supply chain, customer relationship, campus solution, and there's more. If I added, there's not 174 SKUs on here if you can count quick. But if I put all of them on here, the writing would be so tiny you wouldn't be able to read it. But that's just a huge number. And I said 5,000 customers. I don't think one customer owns all the SKUs. But we know that people run a lot of PeopleSoft. That's a lot of systems that's out there running in production. Going to the future, one of the big things that gets a lot of talk are chatbots. And PeopleSoft has them. They're on the roadmap. They'll be released in 2019. And I know that that's probably going to happen because Sierra-Cedar has their own chatbot. We have a chatbot that can, just through texting, you don't have to log into the system. It can change your address. And the first place we use that, targeted for use, I should say, is for a student system, Campus Solutions. So anyone that has students in college or had them in college, how often does a student change their address? At least twice a year, probably 3 times. They change it when they go to school, They come back from school, they might change it even while they're at school a couple of times. And then they change it back to their parents' address when they go home. Of course, parents have actually moved on, not left a forwarding address. Not many parents do that, but they're real and they work, they walk, they talk, and we're going to see, I'll make a prediction that we'll see, instead of having just the squares and circles that I showed from the user experience, chatbots will be one of a major way of interacting with the systems where we'll never actually go onto the system. We'll just do requisitions, we'll do change of addresses, we may do open enrollment just through texting, and I think that through Siri and Alexa, and I hate to say her name because there's one in this room and she'll want to start talking to me, we'll be doing our changes that way. People will wonder, not only did you used to do something like this with pen and paper, they'll wonder, you actually had to type it in? Yeah, we did. But these are coming, and this is the future of PeopleSoft. So PeopleSoft value. I told you that there's a lot of value in PeopleSoft. This, again, is from our HR technology survey. It's published. This is what people reported. What this graph is showing is what the external costs are per employee. Just external costs being how much do you hand over to the vendor that's supplying your system and supporting it through maintenance fees, etc., plus any outside consultancy that you may have to, that you're paying for doing some work. So starting at the top, on-premise $214 and going down through an all-cloud $300 per employee. On-premise is much less expensive than going to all cloud. But before you just run off, let's add to this how many applications are being run. So on an on-premise application, and this is just HR data, we just are finishing up the financial survey that we did, and I didn't have that data ready yet. But for just HR, for $214, you get 6.2 applications, again, averages. And the reason why we didn't include internal costs in this graph is internal costs go all over the board to people that just have maybe do life support for the system, to organizations that spend a lot more on it internally to derive more value, such as Domino's. And cloud has over 9 applications, 9.05 for that 300. So we don't know how they're using their applications. We don't know the value, but we do know that if you're running cloud, you usually have more applications and you're paying more. So let's move on. So other ways to derive value from PeopleSoft. Number one, and this isn't to show you data from our survey, but number one, it's been number one for so many years, is have a system strategy and a roadmap. And that means to me is, I put that into maybe a different, as an analogy. If we're foolish enough perhaps to take our kids on a road trip to Orlando, to Disney World, and if you have teenage boys, you better give them some information such as where we're stopping to eat, every few hours, where they're going to stop and play in a pool, etc. And if you do that, the trip's going to be manageable and you'll get there successfully and people's expectations will have been met. But if you just launch and kind of say, hey kids, we're going to Florida, and they get in the car, everyone is going to have a miserable experience because they don't know where they're going. And that's what a strategy is. The strategy and the roadmap is how you're going to get there. And everyone should have it. It should be updated every year. We generally recommend 3 years. When you start even getting out past 2 years, systems are changing so quickly. You can't predict really very hard in 3 years, but it's still worth doing the exercise so you know what's on the horizon. Adopt new features and functions. I can't say enough about that, that's how you pull value out of a system. Standardize your processes as much as possible so that whether you're doing a requisition, whether you're filling out timesheets, whether you're promoting somebody, have a standard process. And there are reasons to have variations there, but I think people understand is having a common process. Eliminate customizations and adopt standard functionality. one of my very, very favorite customers is a little bit behind on their PUM images right now. And a few years back, they created a custom open enrollment process. Really slick. But what's happened is that that's been staying the same in all these years. And when they look at the new features and functions that they have, that PeopleSoft's released for open enrollment, they have to admit that, well, this year when we get current, I think we're going to use the delivered functionality for open enrollment because it's better than what we have. The other way to drive value is put your PeopleSoft system in the cloud, off-premise, and let someone else worry about it. It makes it easier to deploy mobile. And then I think just as a general principle, clean up your data. I'm talking with a client right now that's the one thing that they have the most problem with, and we're working with them on a little bit of strategy on how to systematically go through their system, clean up their data, and then archive it. Some leading practices: rolling out fluid and mobile, selective adoption, and select things. Look at each PUM image, and there may be something in there for you. There may not be, but if there is, try to adopt it as soon as you can. It's going to cost you. It costs money to install it and test it, regardless of if you do it today or if you do it a year or even 2 years from now. But the difference is, while your cost is still the same, your benefit of that mobility has changed. And look at Tools 857. Elasticsearch, that's one of the new features that has come out since 9.2, and big help in just finding things in the system. And I use that all the time. The most underused feature, I think, is simplified analytics, pivot grids, and related comments. And if you are not using simplified analytics, look at it to create your dashboards. Again, I think it's the most underused, big enhancement to the system. And as I mentioned, I don't mean to beat the horse so hard, but look at a cloud environment. Just investigate it and see, at least from an education viewpoint, what the benefits are, what the risks are, what the costs are, so that when you're asked about it, you can talk about it. So let's do one more poll as we get near the end. And I'd like to know what people would most like to learn about. If they'd like to learn more about PTF, the PeopleSoft Test Framework, if they'd like to understand how to create custom fluid pages, and we certainly saw that Domino's created custom fluid pages there, or if you're really concerned about security risks, and pick one. Security risk, and that means whether you're on-premise or on someone's hosted environment, cloud environment. I don't care whose it is, but is that a big concern of security? Or is just learning more about PeopleTools 857, new features such as drop zones, how do you use them? We'll have more education, and I'm just curious to see which people like the most or interested in the most. So Taryn, can you show us the results? So pretty even, except security. Well, we will address all of those and send some information to everybody. I think that the drop zones was actually a third, so it eked out everybody else. But thank you for giving us some information about this. So we do have 2 more webinars coming up. I talked a little about putting PeopleSoft in the cloud. The third webinar, which is on April 25th, takes a deep dive into the value of the cloud, how to do it, risks and benefits, and how to mitigate risks. The fourth webinar that we have is how to integrate the integration tools. And while I mentioned that having a strategic roadmap was the #1 thing that organizations should be doing to drive value out of their system, #2 is integration, and having a common approach for integration across the board. And that means that to the entire enterprise, that HR uses the same integration tools and approach that finance and supply chain has, and maybe your customer relationship system. When you're all using the same thing, it's easier to use, cross resources in case you have a bump in work. and it's easier to have systems talk to one another. So those 2 webinars are available to sign up for. So we are getting to the point where we have ready for questions and answers, some discussion and questions. Hopefully we have answers. And one more last slide is this is where you can get some additional information from our blogs, there's some videos and webinars that we've done. There's specific information in here. This link goes to PTF, the PeopleSoft testing framework. There's success stories. There's 2 links, one for our HR survey, one for our financial survey, and then there's also just information about our Oracle practice. And if you're looking for a career change, we are always hiring people, and out on Sierra-Cedar Careers, our listing of our current openings, and we are always looking for good people. And with that, I will open it up for questions and answers. I haven't been watching the chat, Karen, but I think that some people have perhaps sent you some questions.
Okay. And we did have a few questions that came in, so I'll go ahead with the first question. Can you have Lisa explain DOPS a little bit more, please?
DOPS, that is what we call our Domino's online payment system. And basically, we took the PeopleSoft e-bill pay system and customized it for our own Domino's use. And we call it DOPS for short.
Okay. And the next question, this is for Lisa again. Thank you for sharing your modification. And how many franchises use this system? And do you have any estimate if it saves time for them or the corporate office?
Yep. We have about 1,100 domestic and international franchisees using our system. From our franchisee side, they have kind of estimated that they save at least 2 to 3 hours every month with not having to go back and research some of their invoices. And our corporate office really benefited. They say it saves at least a couple of days from their side, from reprinting invoices and sending and researching and looking at payments. Not to mention that it saves us on a lot of our postage and paper that we no longer have to, we no longer have that expense.
Okay, and the next question, we're still on PeopleSoft, but I've heard that you cannot buy in any new applications. Is this true?
I'll be happy to address that. That was one of the exceptions I was thinking about putting out there, that you can't buy PeopleSoft. Organizations buy PeopleSoft all the time. There's a separate sales organization for PeopleSoft. There's they still sell it actively. We're working with a customer, in fact, that is a net new customer to PeopleSoft. But the most common area that I see where organizations are buying PeopleSoft is where they have a number of different systems and they're just standardizing on a PeopleSoft platform. So maybe they have general ledger and billing receivables, and maybe they use something else for expenses. They're using PeopleSoft Expenses. And I didn't talk too much about that, but PeopleSoft Expenses is mobile, it's fluid, it is simple to use, both for the end user and the back office. Thank you, Taryn.
Okay. And the next question is for Lisa. Will the custom fluid application that you did for the franchises impact your ability to update your PeopleSoft system?
That's a really good question. No, in fact, in February, we did a big pump upgrade and it all went very, very smoothly. We didn't have any issues.
Okay. And the next question, do you personally see organizations investing in their PeopleSoft systems?
I'll take that because we know that Lisa just did. She just went through quite a bit of information about how they've made life simpler for their franchisees. But overall, yes, I see that organizations are standardizing. They're buying some additional PeopleSoft modules. They're staying current. They're looking at deploying PUM on a much more regular basis. So that it's just that, if it's May perhaps, and I'm just using May as an example, that on May we start applying images. We do, that's our annual catch-up time, and we're developing more and more PTF scripts, the PeopleSoft Testing Framework scripts, which is investment, and it lowers their cost, We also see customers looking at putting their system in the cloud. They may do it gradually, starting with a development and test, and then going to production. And the one thing I didn't mention is by putting PeopleSoft in the cloud, you have, or off-premise, is that your ability to increase, ramp up, because let's say you have a new project and you need a new instance, or maybe you need to have more processing power or more of something. It's much easier to do that in the cloud.
Okay.
Thanks, Karen.
Our next question, can you share your thought on the speed of cloud ERP adoption in comparison to PeopleSoft?
Oh, that's a tough one because those numbers are hidden. But I think that, and this is purely me speculating, is that organizations that are running PeopleSoft, and if they're relatively current, meaning that they're using Fluid, they're using mobile, and I'd even go as far as saying, let's say it's in the cloud, they have got a sweet system right now, and with chatbots coming out, it'll even be better. Now, I think there are some compelling events that could change that, where a cloud could be extremely interesting to an organization, but I'll save that for another webinar about why someone moved to the cloud. And I do have some of that in our blogs. If you go out to our site, what are some of the compelling reasons? But both are great systems. We work with both PeopleSoft and Oracle Cloud, and we have happy clients there. They're productive, and it's really an individual thing. And if you do want to talk specifically about it for your organization, I'll be happy to. But it's hard to make some general statements about why you would be ready to go to the cloud. Thanks,
Okay.
Sharon.
And the next question, do you use the terms fluid and mobile interchangeably?
Oh, no. And fluid is simply, let's say, the squares. It's the way you interact with the system. But mobile means that I can take PeopleSoft on my, and I'll push the example. I can use it on my iPad. I can use it on my phone. And I live outside the Denver area. If I'm traveling somewhere, I can use it. I could approve time if I was in the UK, with or without Brexit. But mobile means that it's on my mobile device and I can access the system. Fluid is simply the user interface.
Okay. And the next question, has the PeopleSoft customer count overall decreased over the past years? Or Oracle Rep doesn't seem to encourage PeopleSoft, but rather is pushing Oracle ERP?
Well, have the numbers decreased? Well, we showed there were 5,000 organizations currently running PeopleSoft. That's on a global basis. The bulk of those numbers are in North America, and that number has not been decreasing generally over the last few years. There did take a dive when SaaS systems first came out. I shouldn't say a dive, it decreased. And people are moving from PeopleSoft to the cloud, but we also see organizations. I talked about a customer we're working with buying PeopleSoft for the first time, and they will be deploying Fluid there. But we also see organizations buying more applications. So that number has been, I think there might be a little bit of decrease, and I mean little, but it's pretty stable. And 5,000, from what I've seen, that still shows it's the number one system in the world. What should say North America. I think SAP actually has more implementations or live customers on SAP, but they don't have I think PeopleSoft's a great system, and it's widely used.
Okay. And thanks, Richard. And that was the last question that we had. So thanks, Richard and Lisa, for coming and speaking with everyone and answering everyone's questions today.
And thank you, Taryn and Lisa. This presentation, it will be on Quest for everybody's download. If you do have additional questions, always feel free to reach out. Please go out to our Sierra-Cedar site. There are blogs and videos to see to get more information about PeopleSoft and Cloud. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks so much, guys.